The origin of laws. Now, I can say very much about the origin of laws, and I realize that there are many interacting variables that shape the laws, but I'm going to compress it into the essence of the establishment of laws. It appears that years ago, in order to manage tribes and small communities, it was very difficult to manage people unless they invented laws. Now, the tribe leader always got the best of the deal as a rule. And in order to assure that be perpetuated, laws were invented. Laws originate only because of scarcity. If you have difficulty making that connection, imagine fruit growing all over the world on every tree. There would be no laws as to how much fruit you can eat. It grew all over the place. Only when food is scarce does laws come in. Not only food, but when anything is scarce, man makes laws as to who gets what. And naturally, the control group of any society gets the best. And that's the way the law is set. If we run out of material, laws are arranged so that some people get so much and others get so much, and by the amount of work you do, you get so much or so much less. But remember this, as essence, a way of thinking about law is thinking.
What's going on, people? Glad to be here. Today's going to be a fun day. I'm over here with my colleagues, Gabriel Sarabia, my boy Jack Sonneson. In case you guys didn't know, these guys were the ones mostly helping me with scientific analysis before I went on to debate Brett Contreras a few weeks back. In case I wound up catching myself in a little quagmire where I was going to end up getting into this whole scientific stuff, the scientific talks, I made sure that I was at least somewhat educated. I myself don't really operate under the confines of being a traditional scientist. I probably take more of a Faraday approach, right?
A practical approach.
Yeah, I take a practical approach to what I do, which I think is what really matters most at the end of the day. A long ass time ago, I was told, when I first became a trainer, just based upon how I did things, I would get accused by a couple of my colleagues, as you know, Naudi, you're just doing Naudi science, and 13, 14 years passed, and it turns out what I was actually doing was just science. That's what it was, because these people couldn't get results for nothing, and then it was like, oh, it's actually just science. That's what it is. It's just a variation of science. And today what we're going to discuss is some of the aspects of science that I believed in. I thought traditional weight training showcased some fairly conclusive evidence that it was, performance enhancing. And over the last, what's it been, like 4 or 5 years, Gabriel's been telling me, like, no, bro, it doesn't improve performance. And I'm like, Gabriel, you're talking conspiracies. I was like, this guy's just talking conspiracies. It's one of those things. I'll just entertain Gabriel for the time being. And then finally, we were like, let's look at the data. And then we'll just talk about, because when I went into this debate, my original topic of discussion was going to be that, yeah, maybe it does improve performance, but then there's going to be negative byproducts. Come to find out, we started actually looking at the methods and the data, and it turns out all those conspiracies that I thought Gabriel was putting forth weren't conspiracies at all, with like, oh my goodness. It turns out traditional weight training is great at, enhancing traditional weight training, but is not great at enhancing the most basic human function in terms of performance, running. And so I was not anticipating that we would even have a podcast like this, but I was like, I knew that we were going to have a podcast like this at some point after I wound up discovering this, or after I wound up learning of this, not discovering. I mean, like Jack and Gabriel were doing some serious work figuring this stuff out. And we're also going to have a podcast up on the Functional Patterns website, showcasing the links to all the studies, talking about the methods and the data. And then from there, we'll tell you what we're going to be telling you guys right now is how to go about reading the data. So when you look at it and your clients say, well, don't you need weightlifting? You're going to be like, actually, if you want to get a whole lot of nothing or close to nothing of benefit and get very little return on your investment over the long term, then yeah, I guess go to weightlifting. But if you actually want to get a good return on your investment, you should probably do something other than that. Now, what prompts me to even talk about things the way that I do is that people have always told me, now, do you have any scientific evidence to suggest that what you do works? Do you have any evidence? Where's the evidence? Where's the science? And I'm like, okay, well, where's the science? Well, I'm asking the same question. So far as I'm concerned, I'm yet to see any real conclusive evidence that traditional weightlifting actually enhances performance on people. It's conflicting. And with that said, we're on the same level here. If all science has proven is that weightlifting doesn't work, so for somebody to throw that back at me and say, well, Nowdy, do you have any science? I'm going to be like, well, I'm going to throw the exact same thing back at you, which is what I've been doing. I'm like, well, where are the articles? When we were figuring this stuff out or even looking at all the specifics, I decided to post it publicly. I was like, you know what, let's do a little tester. And you guys remember when we put it up on Instagram, we had a few people that came in, they bit, and they're like, oh no, there's plenty of scientific research. And then they would drop the links, and we're like, yeah, we already saw that study. Turns out there was a lot of stuff they didn't mention in that. It seems like they also excluded certain variables as well that were kind of important. And I, as a skeptic, would look at it and be like, I wonder if you intentionally didn't release the data of other findings in that study for the sake of not making weightlifting look so bad. You know, like I'm a skeptic. As much as people think that they're skeptics, I think I'm the biggest skeptic in this field by a wide margin. So anyway, we run a test, and there wasn't a single person that formulated a reasonable response. So we figured, and then people still keep coming back with this scientific evidence. Look, guys, we're on an even keel here when it comes to scientific evidence run through the scientific establishment. When we take results into the equation, we're talking about thousands of results that we produce through functional patterns worldwide. So if anybody's actually produced some level of evidence to showcase that it's training, that there's effectiveness in training, it's functional patterns. We've actually displayed evidence. So far as I'm concerned, I'm still yet to see any evidence from traditional weightlifting actually enhancing performance, namely sprinting performance. And what functions could exist that are more functional for athletics than running? When you look at tennis, basketball, soccer, football, squash, whatever. I mean, even if you look at like golf, you're talking about throwing mechanics. When you look at all these sports, obviously running and throwing are going to be the two most fundamental aspects of athletics. Running is clearly going to be number one. So if we can't see measurable returns from traditional training methods, then at some point we need to ask, why are all these weight rooms in middle schools, junior highs, high schools, universities, professional athletic institutes, and even strength and conditioning facilities all over the world? Why are we still using these archaic methods that don't apply to life? They don't even apply to athletics. What's the point? Why do we keep going down this path? Why do we keep spinning our wheels in the sand? And I'll tell you why. Because it's easy. Weightlifting is easy. Any idiot can do it. Not any idiot can do FP. It takes a lot of concentration. It takes a lot of self-analysis to even be able to get results. You have to ask yourself, am I tricking myself? Did that scoliosis really get better? Or am I kidding myself? Is that asymmetry better? Or am I kidding myself? When this person says, I feel great, be like, do they really feel great? Or is this just another dopamine hit that this person is getting that's making them feel better, that's masking the symptoms of the pain that they're feeling right now? Or did I actually make them feel better? These are the questions nobody in our industry was asking. When I had my debate with Brett Contreras, it was more of a discussion. I was like, man, it seems like to me over the last 10 years, people have been touching their butt a whole lot more than they've actually been trying to investigate the nature of their surroundings. That's what I've been doing. And time passes, and I keep getting, as a collective unit, we keep getting better. I keep getting better. Everybody gets better around FP, while everybody else is like, we're just getting started. We got to start questioning traditional methods. In about 15 years, 20 years, people are going to look back on this podcast and be like, how the fuck did anybody question you guys to begin with? How did that happen? Who questioned you? Why? What were their reasons? Are you serious? That's what's going to be present in about 15, 20 years. So I guess we might as well get the ball rolling and be like, well, turns out science is not really justifying traditional methods. It's really not. So your bench presses, your back squats, your deadlifts, whatever, even your hip thrusters, things like that, they aren't doing very much for performance. Might they build muscle? Potentially. Might they build situational strength? Maybe. And I'm willing to concede that. I'm willing to concede that if you're on your back doing jiu-jitsu and you need to cross-face somebody or push them off of you, a bench press might have some applicability. But with that said, how many things does it degrade? The set principle will state that you are going to adapt to whatever you do most in your environment. So when you adapt yourself into a linear reality, what I ask is how many maladaptations are you making for a nonlinear reality when all you do is linear training? So I guess what we're going to do right now, Gabriel, I guess you can just talk about it first, or Jack, whatever, however you guys want to talk about it. Let's just go into, because you saw this, Gabriel's been talking about this for a really long time. In case you guys don't know, Gabriel Sarabia, he's a human biomechanics specialist. He's been around FP for
4 years?
Almost 5 years. Jack, you've been around for
about
a couple
2 years, yeah.
About 2 years. And guys, let's also keep this in mind, because people say, "Oh, Naudi, you just got a bunch of blind followers, right? Blind followers." Gabriel, I have been disagreeing with Gabriel all this damn time, but I'm like, I was like, bro, you can't tell me that traditional training doesn't enhance performance. You're going to see whether there's blind followers and functional patterns or not, whether we are a cult or not, or whether we're a culmination of objective thinkers. I know we're objective thinkers. Look at the damn results. Onto our IG feed, which I display more results on there, but truth be told, people get bored of them after a while. They don't even want to click like on them anymore. You figure people would be jumping for joy to see some of these damn results, but they're not excited at all. So we don't have blind followers in FP. We actually utilize our nervous system to figure out what we're supposed to be doing with our lives and what we're supposed to be doing with our bodies. And so I'm really pumped to see what's going to go down here. So Gabriel, when did you start seeing these variables? How far back did you go back to see like this data, and how did you kind of gather your conclusions?
No, the problem with scientific studies is that it's very easy to take a sentence from a study without any context and make it mean something that completely different that it was intended to mean. And that's why when we're analyzing the studies, I was like saying that we should analyze the methods they use, the data, and then bring out our own conclusions for that. Otherwise, you're just trying to analyze somebody else's conclusion and making your own decisions about that. So it doesn't make any sense. So that's pretty much what you have to do when you're reading a study. See, well, who did it first? What are their methods? And what's the data? And then you need to just come into your own conclusions. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's one problem. The other big problem is that you need to have data that is comparable. When you're talking about movement, human movement, how many variables you have? An infinity. And you're trying to compare, if you're putting a chart, you can compare 2 variables probably. If you're overlapping like data, you can compare 3, 4, but it's not going to look, you won't be able to compare it. If you put 2 videos side by side, you have some imaging that is comparable. How many variables are you taking into account to do a before and after like that?
I mean,
we cannot really tell.
Yeah, exactly.
An infinity of variables, probably.
Exactly.
So
it's relative to what you can actually see, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So how many variables are you counting? You cannot even name them.
Really, the main ones that you find is everybody just talking about the knee function or the hip function, but they don't even care about anything else outside of that. If you talk to most people, even who are physical therapists, if you mention anything like a lateral rib cage shift or a lateral rib cage tilt or rib hike, rib drop, they don't even care about the rib cage as it relates to the gait cycle. And it's super fundamental to even look at that. Even the cranium, the shoulders, arms, any of that stuff.
Intra-abdominal pressure?
Intra-abdominal pressure. How the hell do you even track that?
How do you quantify that?
Exactly. How can you quantify? And that's really a big thing, guys. What can we quantify? Because you narrowed down a few variables out of an infinity. What's that really going to quantify? Not very much. It's like the problem with people is that they like certainty more than they actually like being accurate. I like accuracy over certainty, personally, because when you have accuracy, you feel good doing what you do. When you're pursuing, a false sense of security, you get the placebo of feeling like you're doing something right. But in the long run, that placebo runs out, man. If placebo accounts for 30% of well-being, I guess they say, like having a positive attitude or whatever they say, then what happens if what happens if that remaining 70% is like a complete override switch to the 30%? In time, you're going to be suffering the consequences. But yeah, that's one premise that you've been telling me, is that scientists, and even beyond that, there's going to be times where we're going to bring up the fact that there's a hypothesis that doesn't necessarily coincide with the conclusions, and it seems like they're leaving some information out of it, right, Jack?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it comes back a little bit to the certainty, like you're saying. If we're going to talk about the human body with infinity variables, if you want to be certain, there's a lot of things you got to test. And as he said, if they're going off 2-3 variables and making the statements that they make and the hypotheses and the conclusions are very certain. They're determinant statements. They're saying things like, if we've done these tests, we can say this is a cause and effect. Sometimes they'll use correlation. But point being, it's like, if you're going to make that claim, you should be very sure through the scientific method that you're okay to make that claim. Do you follow all the processes of eliminating variables, making control groups, all those things? And if you aren't, as you said, not having that certainty is going to cause you to make mistakes. So like when you said with clients in FP, did I actually make a change? Did that asymmetry change? That's at least trying to get to the certainty. If you just say, we have these numbers, we measured some stuff, again, not nearly enough variables accounted for, and I'm going to live my life thinking squats improve sprint performance. That's a problem for people who aren't doing the data themselves. That's a problem for people who don't have the background to say, let me look at the methods.
Yeah, of course.
I
look at all these damn things and I'm like, dude, I can't, clearly I'm not an idiot.
Yeah.
Like Naudi Aguilar isn't an idiot. I can't teach people within 5 days how to do something and then get them to change the scoliosis. Mm-hmm. I'm not an idiot, but when you put up all those numbers, it's like, it's hard to read a lot of times.
Yep.
And when you're talking about something as complicated as movement, you wonder, it's like, are all those figures really representative of what's going on in reality? Mm-hmm. Who's the idiot, right? Yep. That's the question. So at some point, it's like, I think it was an inevitability that we were going to look at this. Somebody was going to find this and be like, whoa, wait a minute. What's going on here? What's going on out there cannot be, can you really extrapolate what's going on out there?
Yeah.
And put it into numerical quantities. You talked about before, if we're looking at moment arms in the body, how many are going on at the same time?
An infinity. You have one moment arm for every dot in your body. Every point in your body has its own moment arm.
Yep.
So if you want to make a calculation for every dot, and you want to make a calculation how they connect with each other,
and how they change in places, in ranges of
while
motion,
they are
how
changing
torques change in different ranges of motion. It's like, it's more complicated than anybody wants to deal with, and so which is why everybody kind of just shies away from it. And they're just like, you know what? Let's reduce things down so we can have our stupid little certainty. And it doesn't work that way, guys. Life doesn't work that way. I think, go ahead.
Yeah, but like the way they do it, statistically, it requires less work if you put a study this way. Let's run a comparative analysis between squats and deadlifts. If you put it on a different way, for example, I want to prove that squat is better than a deadlift in improving running performance in a population of college baseball players, for example, you will have to run probably 10 times more samples than if you just run the comparative analysis. Mm-hmm. So it's very convenient to just run a comparative analysis because you have to do like probably 10 times less work, and you're going to get the conclusions that are more favorable to what you want to do.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
And I think that's another thing that we have to, before we get into discussing the data of some of these studies, because that's what we're going to get into. I don't want to conduct a study. And you want to know why I don't want to conduct a study? Because when I hit that stopwatch or I measure something, I'm going to be like, let me just move that cone maybe for that 40-yard dash or 100-yard dash time. Let me just move it a foot or 2 feet further forward on the after, or let me just fuck with that watch. I might be inclined to want to take the data and skew it a little bit so I can justify my opinion. And if I know my peers are in the hundreds of thousands, and I'm like, you know what? Everybody believes in back squats. I don't want to be the guy that says, hey guys, I hate to break it to you, but it turns out what we've been doing is a waste of time. If you're that guy, it sucks. And you want to know how I know that sucks? Because I'm that guy. It sucked. I had tens of thousands of people, probably hundreds of thousands, because I couldn't keep track of everything. There was a lot of people that were really pissed at me, and everybody knows this. And FP is the pink elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about because I predicted it, and now you're seeing way less people do back squats. But the reason that I wanted to do this post specifically was because, guys, the industry always tends to run in a circle. It's always cyclical. And I want to stop the cycle. So if I inform enough people about this and this information spreads to enough people, or let's say people start going back to the back squat and say, oh, this is a great way to develop strength. Yeah, let's go back to the old school back squats, right? Because that was dead as far as I'm concerned. About 14 years ago, when I first got in the industry, about 13, 14 years ago, it wasn't cool to do back squats, man. When I was in San Diego, people were like, don't be doing that stuff. Like, that's going to ruin your back. There's no way to really, like, carry this, like, do this and have, how would I put it, and have sustainability become a part of the program. And never mind that, you're not really going to enhance any performance. You're not really going to build muscle on most people's frames. It's a waste of time. You need to work on the structural components of the body first. That clearly got washed out over the last 10 years, 12, 13 years. People didn't care about function, and everybody started doing heavy back squats and deadlifts again. Everybody went right back to the bodybuilding stuff for the sake of, I guess, improving functionality. Everybody went down that path, and I don't want to see that. We don't want to see that same crap happen again. Let's learn. Let's put this shit in the past. Like, I inform you guys of the history of it because it's a pretty brutal history. When you get a group of people believing in something, and then somebody comes in and questions that belief, even if there's, valid arguments, it's not a pretty sight. I've been through that. You guys can look at it. If you guys watch my Brett Contreras podcast, I showcase that. Tones have changed. Let's just put it this way. Have the tones changed from what it was 4 years ago, Gabriel? Because you were right there, right? You were right there. You were there for part of it, more towards the tail end.
Yeah.
The tones have changed, right? People have gotten real quiet. And my intent is to make sure that they stay real quiet and that they understand that, what we're doing is not really that conclusive. So let's go into some studies. Let's have a discussion about what's been going on. So that way so when people decide to cite these studies, if you're online and you're debating somebody or you showcase these studies and you say, hey, look, this is what they concluded. This is what their hypothesis was. Now all of a sudden, they're only measuring 5 and 10 meter sprints. Hey guys, just I'm gonna run an analysis on sprinting speed, right? I'm gonna run an analysis on sprinting speed. Even though that we all uniformly acknowledge that Usain Bolt is the fastest man on the planet. What distance does Usain Bolt run?
100.
200.
Okay, so say 200. But what's the one that everybody acknowledges him for?
100.
Yeah. So let's say everybody acknowledges that. Now let's conduct a test of a 5 meter and 10 meter sprint. We'll eventually get into that one. I mean, are people leaving out certain variables? Am I paranoid? Am I a conspiracy nut? Am I a conspiracy theorist? Or does it seem kind of stupid to say we're going to try and find conclusive evidence to support that, that weightlifting apparently increases 10 meter sprint time? That seems like a relevant thing to gauge, right? Anyway, where should we start?
We can just start going through the studies, just giving examples. Yeah.
How we stumbled upon this meta-analysis? Because we were trying to gather material for the debate.
How we came about
what's the name of the meta-analysis?
So the meta-analysis' name is Increases in Lower Body Strength Transfer Positively to Sprint Performance, a systemic review with meta-analysis.
Okay,
so
and they took like 53 studies?
53, yeah. So we came upon this one when we were studying Brett's studies, looking at, okay, where is the evidence? What is the data here?
So what about Brett's study brought this about that you had seen?
In his study, that was about hip thrust and front squat increasing a number of things, including sprint performance, the one we're primarily discussing here. He said, talking about the front squat, it's interesting that in his study, the front squat didn't produce increases in sprint performance because this study says that it did. He referenced this meta-analysis.
Can you look it up and just actually look it up word for word?
Yeah, hold on.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Just look it up. We're going to have Jack look it up word for word. We have the computer right here. You guys can come along with this right now. If you can, look up the actual title of the study, so in case anybody wants to follow along with us, they can.
We'll make a blog post with the links.
And we're going to make a blog post with all the links, guys.
Okay,
right?
So the name of the study is Effects of a 6-Week Hip Thrust versus Front Squat Resistance Training Program on Performance in Adolescent Males, a Randomized Controlled Trial. And then let's find where he says...
That's the study where he cited the meta-analysis,
Yes.
No? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, just talk a little lower, guys, right into the mic.
Yeah.
Okay, so it should be in the discussion here.
So pretty much what happened when we're just starting to review those studies, it's just pretty much like correlations between what they consider lower body strength, because we have a different perception about is what actually strength is, And it's just a correlation between how much weight they can lift and how fast they can run in usually 40 meters or 20 meters or something like that.
Yep.
And most of those studies is just a correlation. But how can you find a causation when you have a correlation of data? You need to run two tests. You need to run first a test that if you increase the weightlifting performance, how that's going to affect your sprinting performance. That's one test.
Yep.
And the other test will be if you increase your running speed, how is that going to affect your weightlifting performance?
Yes.
Okay, how many people can increase somebody's running speed? That's
We
the problem.
can.
Yes.
We do it all the time. But you would have to do functional patterns to do that, right?
That's what I mean. That's why it's convenient just to choose one of the two approaches because probably the other one is going to be, it will be too hard to execute.
Exactly. Well, they can't execute it. Not just that it's too hard, they can't do it, right?
So I actually found 2 times that this study is referenced in Brett's study. One, we are in the introduction. He says, the squat is one of the most well-studied and used exercises in strength and conditioning. A recent meta-analysis on the squat found that increases in back squat strength transfer positively to sprint performance.
Okay. Yeah. So then say the second one, then we'll unpack that.
Yeah, so the second one, which is what I originally found, said, it is surprising, however, that the front squat only elicited unclear or trivial effects in 10-meter and 20-meter sprint performance, as previous research has shown the squat to be an effective intervention for increasing speed. So that was the statement that he used that meta-analysis
Okay,
for.
and so now to unpack it further, within that meta-analysis, how many of those studies actually tested anything? And how much of those were just some form of a survey?
About 15 out of the 53 were tests of
Intervention,
resistance
you mean?
training, squatting, something along those lines in relation to sprint performance.
Okay, so only 15 of those actually revealed that. So we're already going to cut off almost, what is that, 40, like 37, something like that. We're going to
Yeah.
cut off a bunch of the articles that are there from even drawing that conclusion. Because I believe what were the other articles pretty much concluding that hypertrophy equivocates to higher performance, right?
Some of them went on hypertrophy.
Yeah,
Some of
they
them
went all over the place.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like, oh yeah, back squats or front squats or any exercise squatting or anything like that. Actually, based upon what the assertion was made there from Brett Contreras, none of those actually showcased that there was a correlation between a front squat or back squat actually enhancing performance in any significant way.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah,
And we'll
there
get into
was-
the data of it here shortly.
Yeah, exactly. Of the other studies, out of the 53, like we said, 10 to 15 truly were like, okay, we can at least dissect this data based on that claim that Brett made this meta-analysis in reference to. The rest of them the biggest thing is that most of them don't have an actual testing protocol. A majority of the research publications in this meta-analysis were, let's measure all of these ones were on elite athletes. None of them had recreational or average Joes per se.
Or old people.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
A lot of them were in
It's very
puberty.
convenient to not train old people
Yeah.
with traditional weight training. I wonder why that. What do you guys think? Why wouldn't you want to train old people measuring sprint performance with old people
There is
and
another,
using traditional methods to do that? How many of them would survive it, right?
how many of them will fall into your criteria of exclusion? That's what I mean, because that's something by itself. Criteria of inclusion, criteria of exclusion. Why they do that? Firstly, for safety purposes, because they want to have that data that is comparable and to minimize withdrawal also.
Yep.
And to ensure that the primary ends of the study are like fulfilled.
Yep.
But it's somehow convenient, for example, if somebody has a minor injury, they have lower back pain, they can still run, probably way slower, but it would be very convenient just to take them out of the study if I want to prove something. You know what I mean?
Of course.
So just depending on how you design the study, how you design the criteria of inclusion or exclusion, you can have data that means something completely different.
I've worked with several physical therapists. There are quite a few physical therapists certified in functional patterns utilizing FP in their training. And many of them told me that they themselves partook. Not many of them. I've had maybe about 6, 7 of the people that were actually talking about how they were part of studies. And about 3 or 4 of them, I'm not going to list their names off. Yeah, we were intentionally excluded because the results were not going to be into the favor of the researcher themselves. I've been told this on a few occasions, and I'm like, It seems like that's the problem with science. If you have an agenda, then you might be inclined to want to skew the data. You're going to have an ego associated. Science is not really science, and everybody's like, well, if science says it, if if the whole unity of the scientific establishment says that this is okay, then that must mean it has to be okay. So now all of a sudden, because science says it's okay when I put a barbell on my neck and I'm going to smash my spine, the scientific literature is going to now forge a fascial blanket around my spine to protect me from dealing with longitudinal compression, right? Because the science says it, right? Because science is going to protect me, right? The scientific establishment protects me from all these things. So when we go back to the actual data of what was there,
Yep.
what did we find? Wasn't it pretty? Many of them were just stating that athletes that have more hypertrophy than lower level athletes, that they were going to lift more weight and just run faster. Wasn't that kind of it?
That was, yes.
The conclusion that I draw that they're drawing is that they say that if you establish more hypertrophy, you're going to be more athletic, even if it goes outside the confines of the said principle.
Yeah, that's about the limit of what could be claimed with what's there. And even then, the ones
That's what I mean.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
Which is what I'm assuming that's what they're drawing.
Yeah.
And that's what I know they're drawing, because they always say, well, what you do is you just do the weightlifting, and what do? You blend in the training. You blend in the muscle into the reality after you just program the muscle to not be blended into the environment.
Exactly. And then from there, like, we can even look at, okay, with the evidence, what does each person use the evidence to say? So, for example, going from Brett's statement, as previous research has shown the squat to be an effective intervention for increasing speed. And then let's look at the title of the meta-analysis. He references increase in lower body strength transfer positively to sprint performance. So Brett references this study talking about squats. The title of this is strength, lower body strength. Are those the same thing? That's debatable,
Well,
right?
and that's maybe we're nitpicking, but at the end, really what it comes down to is, and we'll eventually we'll do another podcast discussing why functional patterns is already scientifically being validated based upon the approaches that we use, where we talk about stimulating muscle chains from a length potential and then creating a driver somewhere else in the body. That's what you call an IMAP, or a chamber sequence, right? Something that we've been working on for a few years, right? I've been working on that for about, I would say, like 6 years. It's been like I've been working with variations of that, stimulating muscles while they're lengthened, because muscles, from what I understand, cells duplicate whenever you stretch them, and they die whenever you compress them. So if I can take a muscle, put it into a length potential, and then create a contractile tension somewhere, I guess, at a distal point from that, would that be an accurate way of saying it?
Yeah.
Then ultimately, now guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to stimulate that muscle depending on how I'm positioned in space when that's happening.
Yeah.
So going back to what's going on here, Jack, let's break down some of the numbers.
Okay.
Because this is one thing that I want you guys to really focus on, is the numbers. What does the data actually say? So let's break down part of this meta-analysis. Take the ones where they actually showcase the study. And then there's going to be some complications, because eventually we're going to talk about margins of error, right? What do they mean by a margin of error? And we're not entirely certain of that. But from what I know, when you say margin of error, what does that mean, Gabriel?
Margin of error is how accurate your measures are, pretty much.
Would you conclude with that?
Yes.
Yeah, I would say the same thing, right? You're leaving a little room to say, you know what, like something based upon our measurements got this off. When you say margin of error, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by it. That's how I see somebody should mean. How somebody would be trying to communicate that kind of point if they used that combination of words.
Yeah.
Yeah, what has a larger margin of error? If you measure 400-meter sprint, or if you measure 10-meter sprint?
And then also, if you measure 10 people or 100 people.
Or if you measure the same people 10 times.
Yeah.
What's going to have a larger margin of error?
And then depending probably on the field of study, the margin of error may be calculated differently too. Generally speaking, it's saying this amount of data, change in data, could be due to chance of all the different variables in testing. This far of a change, it would have to be greater than that in order to be conclusive, not by just chance, the change.
Yep. So that's going to be one of our concerns, is how far does the data go outside the margin of error? We're going to mention that a few times, and we realize maybe that somebody's going to say, well, you know what, that's what you guys are saying is irrelevant because of X, Y, and Z. If somebody makes a response, we'd be more than happy to like address that point later, or even just become educated upon it, because we're still trying to find out how they find the margin of error within each one of those studies. Correct?
Yes, sometimes it's margin of error, sometimes it could be standard deviation. That means that how much the data is deviating from the mean. That's what a standard deviation
Okay.
means. So sometimes it's margin of error, sometimes it means something else. The problem is that a few of the studies, they don't even say what it means. They just put plus, minus. What does that mean? Is that your standard deviation?
And let's talk about this. If you shave off 0.08 seconds of time or even 0.1 seconds of time off my 40 and I'm running from what, a 5 to a 5.2 or something like that, I'm like, is that really, if we tally the compression that I put on my body and my joints to get that minimal return, that's ridiculous. So that's going to be a big part of it too, is that the changes are very insignificant. If we're talking about actually really changing somebody, I'm like, I want to shave off, like if I was shaving off a half a second, you know, on something like that, I'd be like, that's pretty significant. A half second makes sense to me. And maybe you could say, well, you know what? A 4.3 to a 4.2 could be all the difference between being legendary or not, a 4.2 to a 4.1. But did they measure any athletes that were operating at that level? No. So when people are like, well, what about training high-level athletes? Be like, well, so far we haven't seen, you know, Messi or Ronaldo or LeBron James or anybody like that actually get put into a study. So we're not even talking about the elites of the elite being tested here. We're talking about collegiate athletes. Good athletes, don't get me wrong. But if you're going to tell me that increasing or I guess shaving 0.06 seconds off my 10-meter sprint or something like that. I guess we'll look through the numbers. Let's just start going into the numbers.
Yeah.
Like I said, guys, we're going to make a blog post about this, talking about the non-science of traditional methods. And then for all you guys out there saying, well, where's the science for functional patterns? Where's the science? I need to have, where's your science, bro? Bro, where's your science? Like, yeah, like I need to know where science is. Let's just pie pants, science. Yeah, like we need to get the science out here. Be like, so yeah, we're going to showcase some science to actually verify our conclusions too. And we already have people getting ready to work on, if we conduct science with FP, if we conduct a scientific study with FP, realize that we're going to film everything. And we're going to release every single video, every single session. Because that's another thing that concerns me with before we get into the numbers. This is another thing that really highly concerns me with science as it relates to training. What happened? What's been the experience with people who do back squats? Do their knees hurt? Do their backs hurt when they start pushing more or less weight? Typically, I would love to see that in a scientific study. I want to see what happens when you put, you know, back squats on a person's, you know, or a barbell on a person's back and they start doing like 1 rep maxes routinely. I'd like to see them do that for 3 times a week. To showcase how much power they're producing, right? And I'd like to see it on video. I'd like to see what other interventions have to be done to rehab a person after they've been damaging themselves with those forms of training. I'd like to see what the interventions are. Because I'd imagine that sometimes they're like, maybe I'll do some extra stretching or I'll do something else to try and like, you know, dissipate the tension, the dysfunctional tensions that I've created when I was doing the weightlifting. It'd be fun to analyze. And so if we conduct a study at FP, yes, we're going to be biased, but just keep in mind, we're going to film everything. So that way you guys know that we're not bullshitting. We'll measure everything we can. We'll put where every stupid little cone is. We'll make sure that we videotape everything. So that way you guys can't say, oh man, you know, they fabricated the data. Because what I'm going to say in many regards, even for the small gains that are there, I can't help but think as a skeptic, even those small gains, are those small gains really gains? Who really conducts a study on just a 20-meter sprint? Who in their right mind would do that? Who in their right mind would do that? Are people excluding data? I'm going to keep repeating that over and over again. Is somebody excluding data? Well, you can know that if you do what? Camera's rolling. Camera's rolling, right? When you have a camera there, it becomes very easy to know if somebody's skewing data or not. Did you just have them run for 5 meters and then call it quits, or 10 meters? How far did you have them run? I think that's kind of important, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because when they... go ahead.
Yeah, why can't you hunt in nature in 20 meters? Or do you need to run to collect that
But never mind. Let's just fulfill the societal hype. The fastest man in the world runs what distance?
100 meters.
Yeah, right. Usain Bolt. I think he ran a 4.240. He's not even in training right now.
Yeah.
He ran a 4.240, being the fastest 100-meter sprinter on the planet. Right. And he is out of training, and he ran a 4.2. So I think it's safe to say we can just say like the hype. Let's just give into the hype and say the 100-meter sprinter is the fastest person on the planet. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to also run an analysis, or we're also going to, you guys have been looking for 100-meter sprint analysis on weight training, right?
There was not.
I couldn't find any.
Yeah, so if you guys would like to bring them over, we'd love to see them. We'd love to see them. If you guys have them, if you're in the audience and you're like, oh, I'm going to shut these guys up, by all means, send them our way because we've been looking for them. We can't find these studies because from what we can account, there's not any studies showcasing beneficial effects of traditional training in any way, shape, or form with traditional methods. At least with the back squat or deadlift or anything along those lines, we're not seeing that kind of stuff. So if you guys have the data, by all means, share it with us. We'd more than love to actually unpack it. But anyway, Jack, let's go into the methods and the data of some of these scientific studies. Go ahead and just put forth the title of the article if you have it there or whatever. Yep. And again, we'll have all the links on the website. We will be making a blog post very soon with everything. So that way you guys can see that we're not just making these stuff up or that we're just falsifying material. These are our interpretations. Could our interpretations be wrong?
Of course, yeah.
Potentially.
Of course.
We were trying to find people who could show us that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so for me, when I was sitting there with you guys the entire time, what was I saying?
Make sure that we're not keeping our own bias from seeing the actual results.
Yeah,
Make
that's
sure
what I
we're
said.
checking in.
Did I not say, look at the fucking data?
Yep.
Do not allow yourself to get there. And I know you guys were already thinking about that, but I'm like, just be safe.
Yep.
Because I don't want to look like an idiot later, making a podcast like this later when we reveal it. So it's like, yeah, because there's a lot on the line here. We're talking about entire university curriculums being completely revamped. Because when they see that Olympic lifting actually doesn't enhance functional performance, they're going to have to rewrite some books, bro, right? We're going to have to rewrite books, right? And there's going to have to be a nice little logo that's down there on that damn book. That's going to be it. Because some of us have been actually doing science while other people have just been playing science, playing touch butt, and calling it science. So, yeah, guys, we're going to have all this information there. So don't worry about that. We're going to cover that.
Yeah, and
Give
not
me a
only
forward,
that,
Jack.
we went outside of the meta-analysis too, and again, looked at all the related articles to these, any other squat and sprint performance things. We tried to find anything. So if there's more, send them our way. But for example, in that meta-analysis, we went through the 10 of them that had the closest thing to evidence. It was like, okay, these ones at least are presenting enough data that we could discuss whether squat increases
Pretty much
sprint
the ones that
performance.
have an intervention on.
Yes,
Pretty much
exactly.
that they measure the
sprint
speed,
before and
they
after.
did like a training program, and then they measure the speed after.
Exactly,
Okay,
yes.
Yeah.
And then obviously, like for example, this first one, this was the one that had, out of these 10, probably the biggest decreases in time. So the increases in sprint performance were greatest.
What's the name and the authors?
Our changes in maximal squat strength during preseason training reflected in changes in sprint performance in rugby league players. And it's Paul Comfort, Andrew High, and Martin Matthews. So in this one, they tested elite rugby league players only. So again, that's excluding a large portion of the population. And they tested the 1 rep max squat and then 5, 10, and 20 meter sprints, nothing beyond 20 meter sprints. And then they, before and after, tested those things. And then there was an 8-week training period where they were doing, back squats, mid-thigh clean pull, Romanian deadlift, and Nordic curls, but back squats being the big one in there. So the thing to note before we even go into the numbers is that there is no control group in this study, meaning there is no, within the rest of the parameters, there's no group being tested for, so what I'll get to now is that these are elite rugby players.
Kind of important.
Exactly. They're elite rugby players who are also, mentioned in the study, who are also doing agility training and rugby training. This is a preseason time with an elite rugby team.
Kind of important.
So there's no group being tested for sprint increases or decreases without doing the squats and the Nordic curls and the Romanian deadlifts. There's just that intervention, no control group to compare it to. So then we go into the 5 meter, 10 meter, and 20 meter numbers.
So we would classify these as what kind of variables, Jack? I learned this word from you, actually.
Confounding?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
These are variables of the confounding type.
Yeah. That you can't make a definitive statement if you haven't included a control group based on the how the scientific method is supposed to be followed in its origins. So of the 5 meter sprint, there was a 0.08 second decrease with a 0.06 margin of error. So that is outside of the margin of error. Again, this was the one that had the best numbers, quote unquote.
So how much in sprint speed increase was there?
0.08 seconds.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Hold on. Was that for like the 10 meter?
That was for the 5 meter.
And that's pretty good. We can give them that.
That's all right.
I'll give them. No, that's good. For 5 meters, you're shaving almost a tenth of a second off. I'll give them that.
Yeah.
So what else did they test in that one?
10 meter and 20 meter. So the 10 meter had a 0.13 second decrease with a 0.07 margin of error. So again, that's outside of the margin of error.
Yep.
Proof.
Give it to them.
20 meter, 0.018 second decrease. So again, outside of the margin of error, that was 0.09. But then if we look at the percent changes, this would be giving evidence to that we need to be testing longer meter times.
course.
It goes from, so the 5 meter was a 7.6% time decrease, 10 meter was a 7.3% time decrease, 20 meter was a 5.9% time decrease. So even though the time was greatest shaved off in the 20 meters, it's the smallest change of all three of those.
Oh.
And again, 5%.
What's the tendency? What would happen if they run 100 meters?
If it was following this correlation, it would be by 100 meters, maybe not even 1%.
Hard to predict, but yes, that's if
Yeah,
it's
exactly. I can't
only
make that
20
claim,
meters,
but the indication
Who
would say
tests
that.
20-meter sprints? If the fastest man on the planet runs 100 meters, right? If that's the standard of the fastest, who's the fastest person on the planet, guys? The 100-meter sprinter, Usain Bolt, right? If athletic institutions respect Usain Bolt as being the fastest man on the planet, why are they not conducting 100-meter tests? Why? I wonder if they would get injured. Maybe that's
Yeah,
why.
it could be, yeah.
Maybe they're like, let's just gauge 40-meter sprints or whatever.
Yeah.
Why would you exclude 30 and 40-meter sprints? Why? That's the question I ask.
Yeah.
If people can run longer than that, why not include 100-meter, 200-meter, 400-meter, 800-meter?
how many steps can you take in 5 meters? Probably 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Is that representative of what you're going to do in 100 meters?
Yeah, exactly.
And again, in relation to those numbers, there's no control group. If there would have been a control group, we could have seen the control group get significantly greater decreases, which then would have said, based on that evidence, that the squat decreased performance. So without the control group information, there's a ton of info we don't have.
Hold on. This is going to be the issue, bro. That if you just get people to run with the same mechanics that they have,
Yeah.
and you change no variables, they'll be like, well, they just run the same.
Mm-hmm.
They're just going to. So this is the I remember a long time ago, I had debated a guy on social media, and he was like, I was like, are there any long-term studies that have showcased, the effects of weight training on the human body? Like continuous. Let's just say, oh, you know what? I'm doing weight. Because people will be like, now you can't make a claim that heroin addiction is the same as weightlifting. I'm like, well, let's put it this way. If you did weightlifting 5 days a week, 6 days a week, years on end, and you just did the same program over and over again, I guarantee you would have the same points of degeneration in the body. And I have seen this happen on people. I have seen lives ruined much like that of a drug addict. Much like that of a drug addict. You'll start finding even people doing yoga and all this stuff. You'll see it on social media starting to become very open about their depression. And unfortunately, a lot of times they end up committing suicide because they can't deal with the pain going on in their body and they have nothing to actually resolve their problems. So people think, well, you know what? There's no, now that what is it? Correlation does not equivocate to causation. I understand that, but I can throw that exact same statement at you guys. So the premise is that you keep training like this over and over and over again, you're probably going to get injured. If you do it every single day, you're probably going to get hurt. And I think if we're what prompted me to even talk about this? What was it? I lost my train of thought.
Lack of control group?
Yeah. So going back to the whole premise of like, if you do a scientific study, you can't have, if you're being scientific, you can't not have a control group. You can't not have a control group. And that control group needs to have some other thing where it's like, you know what? It's not just about trying to focus on sprinting faster or whatever it may be, or like, okay, let's just focus on a person sprinting and then sprinting again. You need to say, okay, they need to do some kind of sprint training that are oriented around sprint training and enhancing sprinting if we want to make a good correlation.
Why not having 2 controls group? That one that is doing sprinting and one that is not doing any type of training.
Yes, that's what I mean.
You can do that too.
Or then have the weightlifting people also do the sprint training, and a lot of times they are, right?
So, yes, but when they do both, they don't test it. So they'll test squatting and sprint training, squatting and high intensity interval sprints.
So you can't really know which one is actually, you can't really know which one is actually.
Because they never isolate them.
Exactly. Yeah. So isolate them. Don't be like, oh, well, let's blend them all in. You gotta have the weightlifting in there, bro. Mm-hmm. You can't, you're being a bro when you're doing that.
Let's take this one where they actually took a control group. This is out of the meta-analysis. It's by this person named Kun Han Ling, probably a Chinese person or something. Mm-hmm. The name is The Effects of Hip Thrust on Strength and Power Performance in College Baseball Players. They took 20 people for 8 weeks, people that were doing baseball, and they were already doing back squats. Mm-hmm. On the hip thrust group, they have them stop with the back squats, and they put them in a progressive load of training of hip thrusts. Now the control group, they are only doing baseball training, and they stop doing the back squats. This is what happened. The 30 meters on the hip thrusts, they reduce it by 0.02 seconds.
It's
on
the same.
On the regular baseball, the group that stopped doing back squats, they reduced by 0.08 seconds. What happened in the max? Well,
But that all falls within the margins of error. Let's just say it's
but
it's
this
the
is
same.
this is the conclusion that they got from this, that there is not really a correlation or there is not really an improvement. You can get another conclusion from this because
But in all fairness, I had a discussion. This is about the hip thrust, right?
yeah, look
hold
at
on.
something.
Okay.
Let me just mention another data. On the hip thrust, the group that did hip thrust, the 1 rep max increased by 44 kilograms. On the group that did nothing, increased by 3 kilograms. So you can get a conclusion that lifting higher weight on a hip thrust is going to slow down your increasing performance.
Now hold on, but
Which is not really
But we have
conclusive.
to also see it like this, because I talked to Brett about this on the podcast a few weeks ago, and I gave him the benefit of the doubt of saying like, look, they may have been doing the hip thrust the wrong way,
Probably.
and so if they were doing it like Brett did, then maybe it would have gotten better. So at some point, we also have to account for the variables that not every trainer and not every scientist is testing things to the same degree, right? So it's like with the Bosu ball.
Yes, but why they don't put that on the exclusion character? If you're not doing the hip thrust properly, you shouldn't be on the
Of
data.
course, that's it. but that's the dilemma with all of this. Is
Yeah.
that if you say, okay, look, all unstable surface training is dysfunctional and that it should be eliminated because it decreases performance. Who did that research? Were they competent enough to even do that? So let me put it this way: if I was having people do front squats, if I was having people do back squats, I could probably have them increase their performance just based upon my knowledge of biomechanics. I'd have to modify the techniques to some degree, but I could probably increase it. So automatically, you have to take into consideration that the exercises themselves, if they're not taught properly, which not all scientists are teaching them identically, because not all scientists are looking at all the same variables at the same level. Maybe they are, but I don't think they are. You can't really even make a definitive conclusion. So on my end, it's like, that one revealed that the hip thrust actually did worse than doing nothing, right?
No, they improved the speed. It's 0.02 seconds faster, but the group that did nothing improved more. So that means that it slows down.
I'm not gonna equivocate that the hip thrust really made anything that much worse. What I will say is this: is that the hip thruster probably created a lot of compressions in the body that probably weren't advantageous, and you didn't improve.
No, but you know what happened with the control group? They stopped doing squats, too. Also, not only the hip thrust group, they were doing hip thrust, but the control group, they stopped doing squats. So there are 2 more variables to add to this data. That's what it means. It's hard to compare those numbers.
Why would they do that?
I understand that because you don't want the squat to influence this data, because otherwise it would be hip thrust versus squat instead of hip thrust versus nothing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so I
exactly.
understand why they did it, but it might have been that, probably because they are not doing squats, that they were faster. Or that they increased the...
But let's not draw that correlation. Let's just say it's inconclusive.
You cannot tell. 30 meters, you cannot
You
tell.
don't know. We can't tell.
Yeah.
We can't tell. So we're not... and again, guys, I'm just telling you, not everybody does a bicep curl the same way. I do variations of bicep curls, and they're different. They're very different than the way that you would traditionally find a bicep curl being done. But a bicep curl is not dysfunctional. I used to say they were dysfunctional. You want to know why? Because I had no idea how to do them. A lot of times it just comes back to the fact that I don't know how to do them. I quit doing lunges for a while when I trained people. You want to know why? Because I didn't know how the hell to do them. I was like, why am I going to do something that I don't know how to do? But many times I'll just say, we are not accounting for all the dysfunctions. When I used to tell people, like, look, and I'll still say this, are you really going to do 50, 60 push-ups? Drop down and give me 60? Drop down and give me 50? Is that really going to help your posture? Is that really going to help your structural integrity? No. That's going to build dysfunctions. So there are some dysfunctional exercises that are out there, but I will outright tell you guys that if you create stronger isolated levers that connect to the rest of the body, you're probably going to become a better athlete. So I'm not saying that it always has to be integrated every single time, but the more that you can incorporate those isolated levers with more integration on the body, the better results you're going to end up getting. So keep in mind, we want to be fair. We're not saying that weightlifting is going to decrease performance. What I will say is that weightlifting is going to probably cause lots more compression. It's going to make you hyperflaccid, I'll say that, which is then going to be detrimental to the body. But the argument that I'm here to make, the argument, hopefully you guys agree with it. If you don't, you guys can let me know, is that traditional training does not conclusively increase performance all across the board.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right? I think that's the point. It's like, so let's tone down that T-Nation confidence that happened in the mid-2000s, right? Let's tone that shit down. That's the premise. It's that people got really loud for many years, and you can see it all over storyboards all over the internet, right? You can find me on Reddit, and people are like, oh man, that Naughty Aguilar guy's an asshole. He's completely, what he's saying is unscientific. Let's go back now. Let's go ahead and look at this data now. Let's look at the data now. You're going to sit here and tell me that a 0.02 increase on a 30-yard dash, 30-meter dash is worth mentioning? A 0.08? So I'm going to compress all my joints to get a little bitty gain that could fall within the margins of error, right? I could have woke up and ate a crappy meal one day, or I could have lost sleep the night before. You're going to sit there and tell me that, because I think that's a lot of time what they have to say with regard to the margin of error. They probably have to include that you don't feel the same every single day. One day you may have your glycogen stores may be depleted. The other days they might be replenished. So so if it's within a tenth of a second, that can completely change relative to how you're feeling in a day, man. Yeah. You can't just say, oh yeah, you can feel on testing day, on the first day, terrible, and then show up on the last day testing, be like, I feel great, and then completely smoke it and think, oh, look, let's draw this correlation that whatever I did hopscotch. We're going to conduct a study on hopscotch and its effects on 40-yard sprint times or whatever, right? And then at the end of it, if everybody happens to have a good day, let's say there's a lot of sun out, there's better weather at that time, and for the entire study before that, like say for the first 2/3 of it, it was just rainy, cloudy, cold. Everybody was indoors, sitting around a lot, and that last portion, everything was sunny and people were outside. I could conclude that hopscotch actually was what increased my sprinting speed.
Yeah. And not only that, that example wouldn't even be accounted for in something like a margin of error, because the margin of error would say more like you were saying, you're sick. Because then the margin of error says, okay, if you have enough people to test. They don't include
that in the margin of error.
That would be.
How
if
you would
of one
feel,
person.
that would be
One person would be because then it's like saying one person out of this population of the testing is not representative of the whole test. But the example gave would actually not be included in a margin of error, but it would affect the results.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's another thing.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah,
Totally.
It wouldn't even be able to be explained. That would affect results and not even be known through any statistical analysis.
Okay, I get what you're saying. Yeah, totally. That makes sense.
And on what Gabriel was saying too, there are, of the other studies, multiple ones where, for example, there's 12 kilogram increases in max squat with the training, but a 0.0 change in 30-meter sprint with a group testing squats and bench press. So there are a couple of these studies where there's changes in max squat, so increase in lower body strength without any increase in decreased seconds.
If it's a 0.1 increase.
Yeah.
Really? Come on, man. You're going to see me. Oh, yeah, because, 0.1 means everything. When you're on that combine, it's that 0.1 can mean all the things. It'd be like, well, we've never tested it on anybody who's at that level, so we can't really conclude that it's actually going to equivocate. Because if you go from 5.5 to 5.4 on a 40, then that means automatically you're going to go, 4.3 to 4.2 on a 40 if you're running that fast.
Yeah, but leave the joint compression aside. Let's take just the time factor.
Yeah.
What if you use the time that you use for lifting and you only do myofascial release, for example? Is that going to make you run faster?
Yeah, that would probably make you run faster. I would draw that assertion. There you go. There's a thesis. But how are they going to execute? Nobody's doing MFR the way that we're doing it either. I've gone. How many massage therapists have you gone to and just been like, God, what a fucking disappointment. I got this vegan, hyper flaccid person who has no idea how to put pressure on me without completely overly taxing their scalings, and I'm supposed to improve my performance with that level of myofascial release? No way. So that's the problem. Even if you do the myofascial release, most of these people don't even know how to administer it.
Yeah,
they have no idea how to actually hydrate the tissue itself. They don't understand the positional orientation that you need to have on the body or on a ball itself to actually get the effects of that. So it would be like, okay, you could have 20 different scientists test the exact same thing and get completely different findings just based upon the fact that some people might be stimulating skin fascia while the other people might be kind of stimulating close to bone fascia, or some people might just be kind of doing nothing at all. So it's some people might just be damaging tissue because they're doing it incorrectly. So even if you do it with myofascial release, how conclusive can it be? The point is, guys, it's way more complicated. So you know what I like? When somebody tells me, well, where's the science? I'll be like, where are your results, fool? Where are your results? Because if I can see your results, now I'm like, oh, your shit works. Cool. Awesome. Because that to me is like, oh, so let me see your results and then tell me what changed. Show me the results, tell me what changed, tell me all the things that you checked for that you're looking at, and then if something changes, I'll be like, you know what? Whether that change is relevant or not, at least something changed. And it tells me that something got better.
How easy is it to fake a before and after on a sprint, for example? Probably you can fake the before.
I've
and you
seen
will
fabricate.
see-
We've had people in FP that fabricated before and afters that I confronted, and they were like, "Shit." They wouldn't admit to it, but they were like, "Yeah, I totally have that person leaning in one direction, completely fabricating." But if you're actually running and your cranium is in proximity to your sacrum, in some proximity, and you're not deviating that, you cannot just fake a damn gait. You can't fake somebody's maximal sprint. You can't fake a max
Even your
sprint.
facial expression on the video will be different.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Everything will change. You can't fake sprinting. That's why nobody bothers with it, guys. And so for many years, people are like, "Well, you're fabricating data with those before and afters." And I'll be like, "Okay, cool. Well, if we're fabricating them, then you can fabricate them too. So why don't you fabricate them? Show some fake before and afters on a person sprinting. Show somebody running correctly, taking variables from Usain Bolt's gait cycle, integrated variables, and like take that where you have an average Joe running like Usain Bolt, and then also take their before, and then see how they coincide, and try and do the same thing that we do. Years pass. It's been 3-4 years, and we're seeing nothing. We haven't seen anything. So the reason I don't trust science a lot of times, guys, and it's not to say that I'm bashing on science entirely. There's good science out there, but there's also bad science when they say, "Oh, UV light is horrible on the body," right? What's the problem with the UV light, Gabriel? Because you're the one that told me about this.
Yeah, when I was doing research about that, pretty much about cancer.
Shouts out to Jack
and
Cruz on this one, but yeah.
about cancer and skin cancer and UV light. I couldn't find a study where they actually use sunlight. They only use UV lamps on rats, pretty much. Is that really what's happening in nature? Or are you getting the full spectrum?
Are your feet on the ground?
Are you drinking
Are
enough
you
water?
grounded? And there's science that showcases that grounding is a legit thing. There's research that showcases that. So are you grounded and then outdoors in nature? Are you eating fish when you're doing that, right? There's so many what's your metabolism like? Are you in a stress metabolism? Are you in are you sympathetic or parasympathetic dominant in terms of your neurological function? Like or physiological function, neurophysiological function, where are you at? Where's your, so there's so many variables to consider. And right there they say, yeah, we're just going to take a UV lamp and then put it on people and then see what that.
They did it on rats.
Yes.
Oh, on people. They did it on rats?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, they did on rats. They did on rats. But I'm sure that Jack Cruz will agree that that's non-native
So-
mutant F, and that's just going to.
So they
ruin your
draw that
circadian
conclusion when there's rats outside running outdoors, right?
I don't think
you
they did
have got
outside.
to be fucking
Yeah,
kidding
exactly,
me.
yeah. The rats are
There's
probably in a
mice
cage, yeah.
outside. There's rats outside, and they get exposed to UV light. Are you fucking kidding me? They really did that?
You
Yeah,
said they
it's
tested rats, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's rats. You cannot really do that testing on humans because of safety concerns.
Oh, dear
You know what I
But
mean?
never mind that, bro. There's fucking rats living in nature, right?
I believe rats were like, they've lived a long, long time. Like they've been around a long, long time. Like they're pretty physiologically stable out in nature. They're an old species.
And they're exposed to UV light.
yeah.
Do rats have the same mitochondrial density as humans? It's not the same.
Bro, there's rats that live outside. Isn't that kind of a confounding variable?
Mm-hmm.
That rats everywhere aren't getting fucking cancer because they're outdoors and not putting sunscreen on. So what we should do to save the rats, guys, this is I have a battle strategy. We should go outside and then douse them in the hell's it called? Sunblock. Find a rat today, douse it in sunblock, and save its life. Because that's what it needs. Because that's what the scientific study says. So, let me put it this way: if you inhale, does that increase your heart rate? It should.
Yeah.
If you exhale, does that decrease your heart rate?
It should.
It should. That to me is sound science. I'll take that. So I'm not bashing science. I'm just bashing bad science. And there's fucking lots of bad science out there. In the amount that I've gotten in my career, let me put it this way, guys. I'm a practical. I orient myself around practical application. That's how I do everything that I fucking do. And through my career, people are like, hey, you see this scientific study? It proves your point here. You see now this proves your point over here. This one here too. Look, you see that right? Yep. Oh, yep. Scientific. Do you see that? It's all pointing in the direction of you being correct about a whole hell of a lot of things. Not probably everything, but a lot of things. Most things. In fact, most of the time people don't really point scientific studies about me being wrong in anything because unfortunately people aren't really testing much of what I even talk about anyway. But for what they do test, yeah, they showcase that I've been correct about that. So it's not like I'm not bashing on science because science is a fucking tool. I analyze stuff. I input a form of stimuli, I get a response. If it's favorable, then guess what I do? I keep using that stimuli. And then when I find that that stimuli gets me plateaued, then at that point I have to modify the stimuli. And when I modify it and I get a bad response, I don't go down towards the direction of the bad response. But it doesn't necessarily mean I say, well, I had a bad response. I just say, maybe I'm not ready for that kind of stimuli yet because I need to understand it better. So let me work within the confines of the stimuli that I already understand. So with that said, nobody's bashing science here. But let's go ahead and continue on with other studies.
Okay, so here's another one. Let's see. Short-term effects of high power, high force, or combined weight training methods. So all they mean by that in this example was high force is just higher percentages of 1 rep max, high power a little bit lower, faster speed, and then combined versions of that. So it's all different variations of squat training with different 1 rep max percentages for 9 weeks. And this was 50 volunteered male subjects from a collegiate football team. Again, playing football, so there's already a number of confounding variables. The data, the high force group, so the ones lifting heaviest, had a 0.00 second change in 30-meter sprint after 9 weeks, and they had a 12 kilogram increase in max squat. So they were training the squat, they had the increase in squat, no increase in sprint. High power, also training squats, just lower weight, higher speed, 0.03 increase in 30-meter sprint after 9 weeks. The combined group, so a little bit of both, 0.06 decrease in 30-meter sprint. So actually, let me say the high power was a 0.03 increase, so they got slower. And then the other two were either 0 change or 0.06 times shaven off the 30-meter sprint. So all of those are inside the margin of error, not conclusive enough numbers. 30-meter sprints, 0.03, 0.06 seconds shaved off. Not only are those numbers not big enough, there was only football players tested. They were volunteers, 50 of them, and so that's another one of those right there. Same exact story.
I wish I would have known. I wish I could have been able to read this, or I would have had you guys like 6-7 years ago.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Let's see something that's a little bit different happened here when they did the correlation about max squat and sprint performance in soccer players. They were pretty much testing. What that's number 11 on the meta-analysis, no?
11 was the hold on. 11
9,
was the
one.
Number
9.
Yeah,
no?
number 9.
Yeah.
That was the one where they said
They were doing a correlation between the 1 rep max and
That's the title of
the
this
performance in sprints.
So the title of this is Strong Correlation of Maximal Squat
that's the
Strength with Sprint Performance and Vertical Jump Height in Elite Soccer Players.
Yeah, it's funny that they say on one of the conclusions that maximal strength, I'm going to quote, maximal strength determined the sprint performance in these elite soccer players. How can you get that conclusion if you're only looking for a correlation? You know what I mean?
Yeah, you can't say determines sprint performance.
Yeah, like it goes back to what we were saying before, that you will have to run 2 tests to see what determines what.
And this one was only a survey. This one wasn't even they just did strength in half squats and sprinting ability. There was no intervention.
Intervention.
And they said determines in the conclusion.
We had another one where they actually said that they were going to measure something, and they didn't. They were going to measure, is it the 100-meter sprint?
Yes, yeah.
And they didn't do it,
I think it was just a 40-meter.
And
then they didn't include the data because it was not good enough. And
then
there
what was the title on that one? Is
that
that the
one,
11?
No, 11 was the first one we went over. But I do have one pulled up where they measure 40-meter sprint time. So again, clearly, so every single study except for the one I'm about to talk about just talks about the seconds, the total seconds, the time over the distance sprinted. So they'll give a seconds as the number. But then this one study, just an example of maybe skewing data, they say we're going to measure 40-meter distances, but then instead the data they give is not the time for the 40 meters, they give the max
speed,
velocity,
the max velocity,
and then the velocity over the first 5 meters.
What's the title on that one?
That one is, hold on, Effects of a Back Squat Training Program on Leg Power, Jump, and Sprint Performances in Junior Soccer Players.
Okay, what's the problem in measuring speed instead of times?
It's
actually max speed. It's not even average speed. Average speed probably is going to give you something more accurate over the 40 meters or what happens in 100 meters. You can have a higher max sprint and probably your 30 or 40 meter dash can be slower. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You can start accelerating and then probably at the end you decelerate too much and then your average time could be slower.
And then the longer distance you'd be running, the more likely something like that would be to come into play.
Yes, I don't want to say that that's what they did or that's what happened. Probably they didn't test it.
Yeah.
But it's convenient to put it that way.
It's there's a lot of convenience in some of these studies.
That would make the percent changes larger. with the
yeah.
meters per second versus seconds.
But even that's what I say. They could be slower in the 30 meters and have a higher max velocity.
And then even then, the average velocity would give them better changes, percent changes.
No, average velocity it will tell you which one is faster because it's an average.
Okay,
You know what I mean? So it will tell you which one is faster.
And let's keep in mind that if we can be skeptical about this, that the scientists can do something about it to silence this kind of skepticism, because I don't think they were probably expecting somebody to ask these questions, but the questions are being asked. So if they have answers to the questions, I mean, we'd love to see what the answers are. We'd like clarification. We'd like to see if there's video coupled with all the sessions. It'd be good to see that. Some gait analysis, all these types of things would be great to see. Why not incorporate gait analysis in slow motion if it's available? Why not do that?
No, that's the thing, that it's very hard to compare methods, because many times when you're training somebody, you need to adapt the type of training you're doing, but that doesn't mean that you cannot follow a methodical approach. For example, and I guess that at this point is no secret that we try to imitate what Usain Bolt is doing while running, okay? So if you compare the ranges of motion Usain does while running, and you compare like your clients' ranges of motion, and then you prescribe some exercises.
When does that ever? When do you ever see that somebody runs exactly like Usain Bolt and they run slow, Gabriel? Have you ever noticed that? You ever noticed that the technique that Usain has? Because that's one thing I was called out for originally when the debate challenge was instituted by Brett Contreras a few years back, was that there's an aesthetic to the gait cycle, and I'm like, yeah. And there's common denominators amongst all athletic humans. There's common denominators. And so what I find with people who run slow is that, the common denominators are what? That they are never doing any of what the good athletes are doing.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. And we see that all across the board, which is why everybody gets great results with an FP that actually sticks to the protocols the way that we put them forth.
Yeah, like people say that Usain Bolt doesn't have good technique because he leans sideways. Let's just have a scientific explanation on
that
why.
Fucking guy has incredible technique. Usain is a fucking freak. Freak. He's 6'5", and he runs as fast he accelerates as fast as he does. Usain Bolt is a freak with this technique.
Let's just dissect the physics of it. What's work? I mean, energy. The energy produced during a sprint. In this case, it will be a force over a certain distance. What happens if your spine, instead of just bending this way, is bending this way and laterally? What has more potential to contract? When you only bend forward, or when you bend forward and laterally?
Both. When you combine them both.
When you combine both.
You rotate as well, right?
Yes. And if you're on top of that, you're rotating more. And if on top of that you're rotating and you're doing all the other things that he's doing.
Because that's happening all the time. It happens all the time.
What has more potential to produce work?
Yeah, when you actually have the functions being potentiated.
Yeah.
Correct? All planes of motion potentiated, right? I guess we won't. We'll get into that maybe in the future in terms of the 6-plane thing. We don't even discuss that right now. That's top secret. Anyway, so let's
keep going.
Go on with the chlorophyll.
Yes. So, I have, again, a list of these studies of the ones that have taken data that have time measured. This next study, for example, strength group, 10 weeks of squat, power, 10 weeks of ballistic jump, control group, normal activity, only 24
What is
males.
normal activity?
Yeah. And then again, for the strength group, at 5 meters, a 0.01 decrease in time, 10 meters, a 0.01 decrease, 20 meters, 0.03 decrease, 30, 0.06, 40, 0.12. So that was the biggest one, the 40 meters, but again, the percent change would be smaller. The power group, 0.0.
Still, whatever.
Yeah.
0.12 is not bad. Let's give them that. We'll give them one.
For
Be
sure,
like,
yeah.
there's little spigot of certainty.
There is
Let's give
improvement.
them a little bit.
What's the tendency? The longer they run, the improvement becomes smaller.
Yes, of course.
Yeah,
But
that's the
let's just
tendency.
put it this way: if you're at 40, you hit that 40-meter
Yeah.
sprint, you shaved 0.12 seconds off your 40 time, right? I'll take it. And how fast were these guys running? They probably weren't running Bo Jackson numbers, I presume, or Deion Sanders numbers,
Yeah.
right? Okay, so typically it's like if you're dealing with lower level athletes, that number needs to become even greater. If I'm going to talk about having a guy that runs a 6-second 40, and I'm going to talk about enhancing him, unless it comes down to 5 seconds, I didn't do shit.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't care. So if you're telling me, oh, you got a guy that goes from 6.0 to 5.8, I'm like, right? That'd be a 0.2 second increase, decrease in time. I'd be like, okay, that's decent. But until it's at 5 seconds, I don't give a shit. I don't care. That's not big enough. I'm not talking about like shaving little things. I guess that's what their justification is.
Shaving little things, you're saying?
Yeah, like shaving little, making tiny little.
I guess, yeah,
improvements
for sure. Like, so, and for example, in that study, the control group. So again, strength group, 5 meters, 0.01, 10 meters, 0.01, 20 meters, 0.03 decrease. Control group, 5 meters, 0.02, 0.03 for 10 meters. 0.02 for 20 meters. So the same between the strength and the control group in this study. And again,
and guys, it's hard for me not to get emotionally invested in this, considering all the crap I've had to deal with that stupid science thing. It's hard for me to not get a little bit agitated every time I deal with this, because every time you bring this up to me, I'm just like, oh my God, why is nobody talking about this? What? Oh, I remember, because there's a lot of people that have jobs oriented around this. I get it. And people may lose their damn jobs. I get it. Adjust, guys. Adapt. Like, start learning new things. Like, start abandon ship, guys. Abandon ship. This is ridiculous.
Yeah. The problem comes, again, so in all these studies...
So, hold on. Jack, Gabriel, so let's... What could be their defense? Like, formulate that. Let's go. Hold on. What could be their defense? Let's do the stupid little devil's advocate thing.
If we were to come at them with what we've said, what would be their defense?
Yeah, I wonder. I want to see. Like, so there's people that have made. It's functional patterns, fictional or functional. Which one is it? Let's go back to those studies again. Let's go back to the studies where let's go talk about that, because there's so many people who have bashed me and functional patterns openly. Please give us a rebuttal. I want to see what it is, because we put it forth online, and there's plenty of people with master's degrees and PhDs on social media, and they follow me, and I know that they follow me because they've commented before, and I'm like, okay, where is the rebuttal? Where are the weapons of mass destruction?
This is what I think is going to happen, like, where people are going to come with studies that don't really prove anything without some type of correlation with 1 rep max and sprint performance, or they're going to just say, oh, I'm doing this because of hypertrophy or because I actually like to do weightlifting. They're going to do one of the two. That's what I think they're going to do.
Yeah, they're going to say, okay, I'm vain and I like to work out. So let's unpack that a little bit. What does it even mean to like anything? That you
get some type of a reward, a survival-based reward from doing an activity?
A hormonal association,
yeah.
correct? So when you say, so I'll be like, that's all good, bro. I like smoking crack. I like it.
You're going to hire a trainer for that?
If they're good, you know what I mean? Maybe they can like get me to smoke crack and like do it better, you know what I mean? It's not that crack smoking is bad for you, bro. It's just you're not doing it with the right technique. You know what I mean? You just need better form. You need to vaporize the crack or something like that. And that's what makes the crack much more effective. It hits your bloodstream differently and whatnot. I think you just need to smoke crack differently. So when people are like, oh yeah, man, it's just the weightlifting is, it's not, there's nothing wrong with the weightlifting. You just got to improve your form. If your form is good, then yeah, the weightlifting is good. And so, yeah, it's not the crack. It's a crack smoker not smoking the crack correctly. That's apparently what it is. I'm sorry, guys, but when you know what we know, it's hard not to look at it in the same token, because it's ridiculous, man. I have seen so many people where it's like undoing the damage. It's like undoing the damage. It's like literally dealing with the drug addict. You work with the client, and they're like, "Oh man, I feel so much better. Let me go right back to the reward system of the weight training. Let me go right back to my group class where we all work out with one another, and then I can go out and be fun again. And I can make myself social because my job doesn't allow me to be social. So now guess what my fitness is going to be? I get to go, thanks Naughty, I get to go have my social outlet again. Thanks FP whoever, I get to have my social outlet once again. Thank you. I get to go fit in with people once again. But is it really ever about solving the damn problem, or is it about a person dealing with an addictive pattern? Some form of a false sense of security that's oriented around what? I got to have friends or something. Mm-hmm. It always comes back to that. And people are like, well, I don't want to look like anybody in functional patterns. Be like, so what does that mean? So the problem is with functional patterns is that we don't have enough mesomorphs aligned with functional patterns. Is that what it means?
Yet, no.
Yet, yeah, of course. Or we're going to try and create them so that way we can shut those guys up too. Mm-hmm. So the premise is like what? It's like, do we need to have more mesomorphs so that way you'll believe us? It's like, what excuse are you going to have? Because guess what drug addicts do? whenever they're called out on their drug addictions. What do? A lot of
Excuses?
they make heaps and heaps and heaps of excuses. I'm not addicted. It's just, I just like this thing, right? The unfortunate aspect of our society is that when you go to the weight room and you go train people, it's synonymous with being a good person or being healthy, right? Even when it's not healthy, right? It's synonymous. People are like, oh yeah, you're going to the gym. Way to go, man. That's awesome. That's great. But when you do heroin, is it ever are good in like is reward centers in terms of how society works, and so is social inclusion ever associated with heroin use at any level?
No.
What about coke?
Yes.
I guess maybe if you're dealing with like the higher tiers of people, right? Then at that point, yeah, it depends on what communities, right? Heroin, not really. What about marijuana? Some circles, yeah, right? Alcohol, woo!
Yeah.
There's lots of social inclusion in that, right? We need to take that into the account too, because scientists. So when a scientific study who just drank coffee conducts a study on coffee, might there be a bias there? Right? Might there be a bias there? I've been telling this shit to people for years upon years upon years upon years. Time passes. I don't do what the science tells me to do, and I feel better, and people around me feel better on a routine basis. You can trust science. You can't trust a human conducting the science. And Jacques Fresco talked about that a long time ago. I can't find the damn lecture when he talks about it, but he says he's never met a scientist. Yeah. Right? When you think about what science is there to do, it's simply there to do what? Alleviate human suffering. And how do you alleviate human suffering? By bringing about ecological balance to society. So if you conduct a study on something that's completely how would I put it? It's inconsequential to what's like going on in reality, then that's not science. You're just playing a game. You're playing touch butt in a laboratory. That's what I see it as. And I wish I could be more professional, guys, but it's just so fucking ridiculous that I almost feel like I have to be kind of comedic to just get myself through this. It's hard to get myself through this and not get like somewhat a little bit agitated and be like, are you fucking kidding me? You really sold that? You really sold it. So when we have a bunch of athletes that are like, oh, I don't know, I feel like I still need to keep doing weightlifting. Like maybe we could just mix FP and weightlifting together. I'm like, actually, there's no evidence to suggest that weightlifting actually enhances performance. But I feel like it does. Be like, yeah, that's probably placebo. You're probably dealing with the placebo effect. That's probably what it is. But I'm putting on more weight. Be like, yeah, cool, that's useless weight. Good job. Way to go. You got a bunch of useless weight on you.
Yeah.
Why don't you pack on weight that actually serves a purpose? Are there any more that we really need to cover, bro?
They would all say the same things that I've talked about: a lack of control groups, a lack of control of the variables in order to make conclusions, small numbers with most of them not being outside the margin of error.
And no long-term studies
Exactly.
either? How many
Nothing over, like, 10
long-term
weeks.
studies have we seen with regard to training?
Yeah.
Where it's like nobody's adjusting. Just follow the protocols. Just follow the traditional protocols of traditional tested weightlifting, strength training. Follow the traditional protocols of traditional physical therapy, and then see how they go. Like, actually do them. Follow the routine. If it was really scientific, you should be able to run on a routine for 5-6 days a week and be fine. Do the cardio, how they tell you to do it. Follow what's been tested. Videotape it. Yeah. Let's see it. Let's see what happens. Yeah, let's not forget progressive overload. Even cut out the progressive overload. Just try and stay in shape,
pattern.
doing what society tells you to do. Do it for about 10, 15, 20 years. Videotape it. Test the effects. Let's see how many people survive it without a surgery.
Yeah.
Maybe metabolic, you might be somewhat okay, but biomechanically, you're going to be in shambles by the end of that. And I have a feeling nobody wants to test that, right? And this is where it gets kind of trippy. And I don't want to talk about it, but I have to talk about it because it's my civic duty to talk about it. Is if people stop getting hurt, what does that do to our social system?
Implosion.
Right? If people realize that, most of what you need is free, which is clean water, right? You just need to be able to get your feet on the ground, get some sun, have good biomechanics, move well, potentiate everything the way that you're supposed to, eat fish, some vegetables, right? Eat foods that are actually nourishing, right? I would just say do functional patterns coupled with Jack Kruse protocols, and what are you going to have? A healthy human. and you're going to have less surgeries. You're probably going to have less surgeries. You're going to have less metabolic disorders, all sorts of different things. And you have to ask yourself, is our economy existing because there's inefficiency? Ask yourself that question. That's the question you need to ask yourself. Why does an economy exist, right? When that shoulder surgery happens, somebody has to front the bill. And an insurance company is probably going to be it, but who funds the insurance companies, right? And how many jobs exist because, because that person tore their rotator cuff, or that person, had a total knee replacement. How much does a knee replacement cost? Can you look that up? What's the cost of a knee replacement? They're projecting there's supposed to be, I believe, 3 to 3.5 million knee replacement surgeries by what, 2030?
20,000, I think. If
Huh?
I remember well, I'm not sure about that.
No. It's 3.
No, but the cost of the knee.
No.
The average hospital charge for a total knee replacement in the United States is $49,500.
Yeah, about 50 grand, right? How many jobs does that create? And I just wonder what that might do to the economy. We're in a crazy time, and I've been telling people this for years, and they're like, "Oh, Naughty, but AI will never replace me." It's like it doesn't have to. All it has to do is just cut into jobs and eliminate human labor on multiple fronts. And people are getting lazier. Never mind that. So it's becoming increasingly difficult for people like me who run a company to run a company because people don't want to work. And so when you say, there's always going to be jobs that replace the other jobs. That's not what they're saying anymore, folks. That's what people used to tell me all the time. Well, there's always going to be new jobs to replace the old ones. I'd be like, no, there's actually not going to be any replacements this time, guys. There is no replacement. And we're going to have to fess up and ask ourselves, what the fuck is an economy? And that's where I would, at this point you in the direction of a man named Peter Joseph, and I would point you in the direction of a documentary series called Zeitgeist. You can almost, for the sake of not getting caught up into conspiracy theories, you can kind of skip to Zeitgeist Addendum and Zeitgeist Moving Forward, which are the last two of the three in the series, in this trilogy. And if you look at it there, then you'll be able to get a better idea of what the hell is going on. When I watched Zeitgeist a few years back, I was like, dude, these fuckers, this guy Peter Joseph and Jacques Fresco, and these people are kind of predicting the future in terms of what the hell is going to happen. I told people for years, and it's 2020, and we're about at that point where we have to start asking ourselves a question: what the hell is a job? Why do jobs exist? And what are the jobs serving, right? And if you look at it all across the board, jobs in general are just serving they're a service oftentimes to deal with dishonesty most of the time. If people were more honest with themselves and people asked themselves better questions, we probably wouldn't have most of the problems that we do. Our economy is as bubblish as it is because it's filled with bullshit. That's the premise. And when you bring in something like functional patterns, it's a little bit radical because it doesn't feed into that bullshit in almost any way. We cut out your biases. Remember years ago, I didn't tell you, hey, let's train these muscles so I can feed into your vanity disorders. I was more like, why do you care about that vanity disorder so much? Where does the origin of that want even come from? Does that vanity disorder really serve any function outside of getting accepted in our culture? Not really. So why are you doing that? Let's start a new community of people. Let's start something new, because this thing that we're doing right now is not relevant. So I don't ride trends, guys. I can't do it consciously and be like, oh yeah, I'm going to just ride a trend. I'm going to tell you straight up, what you guys are doing is not relevant, right? Let's change it. Let's change it. It's a bit radical. But I just wanted to put this up as a way to just be like, look, guys, our system is kind of fucked up. There's a lot of things that are good in it. It's not that it's entirely fucked up, but there's a lot of things that are not good in it. And we need to acknowledge that the people within a poorly designed social system are going to behave in dysfunctional ways. And sometimes what they're going to do is skew data, even scientists, to justify a position. And I'm going to have the balls to say it and not be afraid to say it because it's the truth. And I think it's about the right time to say it because I think we're kind of coming to that direction. You see Andrew Yang talking about universal basic income and things like that. And I think it's pretty clear what's going on. So with that said, do we have anything else that we really need to discuss?
I mean, I think mainly just to say that, like when you were saying, what would they refute with? If this is going, all of these studies over and over have 0.0 something, whatever, 0.03, 0.06, can you make the statement, does squat increases improve performance in sprinting? That's like the main thing is like that conversation. There's just, if you're following the scientific method, none of these would give the evidence.
And
to
never
support
mind
that.
this, guys. What is the most fundamental performance building function in human beings? I think anybody, even when I had talked to Breck and Church about it, even by the end of by the time we went through that little hierarchy thing, he's going to be like, yeah, running is up there. Everybody's going to have to concede to that, man. The reason the glute max and the lats and the pecs and everything looks the way that it does on the body, the reason our legs look so damn long in comparison to that of a chimp, the reason our feet don't look like extra hands like it does on a chimp is because we ran. Running and walking had everything to do with that. So if you can't improve the most fundamental human function, what does that tell you? That what you're doing doesn't really relate to performance. If performance orients around running to begin with, it's the reason that we jump the way we do is because it orients around running. If the knee joint, in terms of our jumping abilities, orient around running to some degree, they have to respect running, then what does it tell you when the traditional training isn't enhancing running? If it can't do that, it tells you that it's irrelevant. And never mind this is the prediction that I made many years ago, is that the fact that traditional training that's in the sagittal plane doesn't actually potentiate muscles in multiple planes, right? And running is multiplanar. So if you look at running being a multiplanar function, if you respect the SAID principle like I do, and people will be like, well, now you don't respect the SAID principle because you're on an unstable surface. No, bud. When an object is in space and it's connected to a stable surface and you're able to stabilize on top of it, it no longer really becomes stable, right? What do you mean by the term unstable? That's the question. So the premise I put forth is that, what the hell was I going to get to? I lost my train of thought. What the hell was I talking about?
The SAID principle in relation
The
to
SAID
multiple,
principle.
yeah.
Yes, the SAID principle. If it doesn't respect the SAID principle, which is a solid principle, and guess what? It's going to be real difficult to adapt somebody to move better. You got to look at the species that you're trying to train. You got to think about how the species adapted. And this is what it's like. The fitness industry filled with weightlifters shot themselves in the foot by saying, unstable surface training, it doesn't respect the SAID principle because you're training on a stable surface, but we're living in a stable reality, right? That's what they said. But then when it's like, yeah, unilateral function dominates all functions, and when you add lateral and rotational components to the unilateral function as well as the sagittal plane components, and guess what? Now we're saying that you're not respecting the SAID principle. Because now what you've done is you're taking the majority of your training and orienting it to a plane of motion that has transferability to life, but it has transferability in minimal circumstances. So that term functional training, which is really what this comes back to, guys, is that you can't say you're doing functional training if you're training in the sagittal plane 90 to 95% of the time. And you can't say that you're doing functional training if you do 90 to 95% of what you do in multiple planes and you do it incorrectly and it doesn't respect the sequences that you find in high-level runners and throwers, then you can't say you're being functional either. It's more complicated than that. It's not so clear-cut. So science is not clear-cut. So we have to, at some level, a lot of people have to make concessions. I made concessions a long time ago. I had to say, man, nothing I do works. None of this stuff really seems to work. It gives people a good workout. I could kill people. I used to beat the shit out of people and keep them out of pain to some degree, but I used to beat the shit out of people. But at some point I was like, I have to eliminate what I'm doing in my training, because if I keep doing what I'm doing and it doesn't work, I'm not going anywhere, man. I'm just spinning my wheels in the sand. Isn't that what you guys had to do? Mm-hmm. At some point you had to say, I got to stop what I'm doing.
Yep.
I have to quit what I'm doing and I have to start all over again. It comes to that point, guys, society is going to have to start all over again. And we don't like starting over. And that's the biggest fear that we have. Because you're like, man, we got to learn everything all over again. We got to sit around. But man, I want my retirement. I want to sit around on my ass and not do anything. Sorry, dude. Nature doesn't work that way. There is no animal in nature that gets to sit on its ass. Nobody gets to sit on their ass. People who make tons of money, guess what they got to spend all their time doing? What does people that have a lot of money have to spend all their time doing, Jack?
Making it and then keeping it.
maybe that, and then counting it.
Yeah.
They got to count a bunch of numbers. That's work. I don't care who the hell you think you are. I'd rather deal with a lot of the physical work than actually counting numbers. And that's what I spend my time doing most days, and it's annoying. It's like when you have to start counting numbers in your head and projecting and formulating what's going to be, formulating strategies that are going to hopefully lead to better circumstances in your life. Man, that is way worse than just showing up to a job and, like digging a hole. That's way worse. Like, I wish I could have a linear path. So, guys, don't fool yourself. Everybody has to start all over, including the people that are already successful, man. So don't trip on that. Start over. It's fine. It's not a big deal. It really isn't. It's gonna be you have to just tell. I guess it's gonna be kind of a difficult sale for many of you that are like, oh man, my training is evidence-based. Yeah, so you're getting, and then when you go back and you tell your clients, well, it turns out it is evidence-based, but the evidence isn't really evident of anything worthwhile. Sorry, you may lose some clients, man. That's what it is. Guess what I had to do? Guess what a lot of people at FP have to do, right? You have to take a step away and be like, and then people are like, you're not going to feed into my insecurities? Because that's not what science is about. I'm not going to tell you that the world is a little round and a little flat, as Jacques Fresco would have brought it up. I'm going to tell you that if I have all the reasons to believe that the earth is round, I'm going to tell you the earth is round. I'm not a flat earther. So I'm not going to sit here and be like, well, so you think, so if I meet a flat earther, I'm going to be like, well, maybe it is a little flat, just a little bit. Like, yeah, let's be friends. Here's a product. Here's a supplement. Maybe it is a little bit flat. You want to buy my supplement? Yeah, it is a little bit flat, right? We're talking about that. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind, okay? Let's be scientific. We don't need to cater to people's insecurities. We can just tell them, be like, look, this is what a human is. A human is this. It's a contralateral reciprocator, and we train it in relation to the contralateral reciprocations. And if we do that, we are going to live healthier because humans have needs, right? Remember, there's an LDL, HDL. What are other things that humans need to have balance? They need to be able to produce dopamine. They can't
Fairly
produce,
regular heartbeat.
Yeah. If they can't produce serotonin, they might be subject towards depression, right? So you need to be able to produce a certain amount of serotonin, and you need certain biomechanical things too. That's what it is. So it's pretty clear cut. So I think in 15, 20 years, when people look back on this, they're going to be like, I can't believe anybody debated you on this. And guys, look at the fucking history. Go on SureDog. Type in Naudi Aguilar, SureDog. And keep in mind, my craft wasn't fully formed yet at that point. But if you saw the kinds of responses that I got, you'd be like, oh my God, look at it. Take a look. Screenshot it. Because at some point, somebody might want to delete that damn post. Just screenshot it. Because it might disappear at some point. That's how history works. But remember, we always look back and we say, oh my God, we had slaves in America? Oh my God, there were Jim Crow laws in America? Right? Oh my God. We dropped dozens of bombs on the Marshall Islands and completely took people off of the Marshall Islands and, exposed them to all sorts of thyroid problems because of excessive amounts of radiation, right? Yeah, we did all those things, right? Generally speaking, we always look back on history. And when it comes to human health, we're going to look back and be like, oh my God, we use all these medicines that don't really cure or solve anything, and we've exercised this way, and this is how and people were depressed, and this is how they dealt with it. Oh my God. People are going to look back in about 20 years and say the exact same shit. The exact same shit. And I'm just telling you, and most of you are going to be like, man, now you're just so goddamn arrogant. I'll be like, yeah, in about 20 years, you're going to just be real quiet about that. It's all good. Make your silent concessions. So long as a concession is made, that's all I really fucking care about. Just make the concession. Make a better decision, man. Take care of your fucking health. Take care of your health. That's really what counts. Don't think that science as a word is going to be a safety blanket for your stupid decision making. If you're an idiot, you're going to suffer the consequences of being an idiot. Until next time, this is Jack Sonneson, Gabriel Saravia, and Naudi Aguilar here at the Naudi Aguilar Experiment, reminding you to think. Period.
Only when food is scarce does laws come in. Not only food, but when anything is scarce, man makes laws as to who gets what. And naturally, the control group of any society gets the best. And that's the way the law is set. If we run out of material, laws are arranged so that some people get so much and others get so much, and by the amount of work you do, you get so much or so much less. But remember this, as essence, a way of thinking about law is thinking in terms of the scarcity. If most of the airplanes disappeared, for whatever reasons, hurricane storms, then the few planes that did exist would be used by the establishment, the key rulers of the establishment. Do you understand that? If thousands of planes exist, thousands of cars, there's no need to make laws regarding who uses cars, but you can make laws about cars. On the highway, the speeds, all that sort of thing. That's to maintain a degree of control. But the best way to maintain control is through technology. Gold is expensive, remember, only because it's rare and it doesn't rot or rust